This is a Power 98.7 podcast. Now we're talking. Subscribe to Power 98.7 podcasts in iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. There's more on power987.co.za.
We're going to talk about Cameroon once again and talking about how they actually dealing with the issues around there, as there is issues of human rights violations, there's issues of war, and then at the same time they have to deal with the coronavirus. Now, prominent Cameroon human rights activist Beatrice Titangi was quite happy when a major secessionist group declared a ceasefire. This happened about 2 months back, 29th March, to protect people from the fear of coronavirus in the Central African state, English-speaking heartlands. But that did not really last. The Southern Cameroon Defense Forces unilaterally declared the ceasefire following an appeal by the UN Chief Antonio Guterres for conflict to end across the world. And just, at least for now, focus on dealing with the coronavirus. To tell us more about this, Isong Asu joins us on the line. Isong, good morning.
Hello, good morning, Gwen.
Are you well?
I'm fine, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Great. And thank you very much for speaking to us. And just on to that, I mean, the ceasefire that was declared by the Southern Cameroon Defense Forces, has it held? Is it happening after that appeal from Chief Antonio Guterres?
It's not really happening, because when the ceasefire was called, quite a few people thought that would be an opportunity for the people in the villages and the towns in Southern Cameroon to at least try and organize themselves and receive some facilities, some help. But a few days after the ceasefire was called, the French Cameroon or Cameroon military went to villages and towns and never respected it, and caused so many atrocities especially in the northern area in Bafut. They've been doing that for about 4 weeks now, so they've killed quite a few people, according to the information we have, and a lot of people are back in the forest where they've been hiding temporarily for about 3 years. So it hasn't helped at all.
And just on that, I mean, the response by the government, have we seen anything in terms of this? Because again, Paul Biya himself has really not been saying much, apparently, as far as this truce is concerned.
He hasn't said much. The ceasefire that was announced, or the lockdown that was announced by the Cameroon government following the ceasefire announcement by the United Nations was never respected. It was ineffective. It was announced from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. That was what the government announced. So from 6 a.m. To 6 p.m. people could go to work, they could go to the markets, but they couldn't be out in the evening. And we know from all evidence that the virus is not nocturnal. So the military was still very active in Southern Cameroon. The president hasn't said anything. It's been one of those where the people in the areas that have been heavily affected by the hostilities, the war, have been abandoned, we believe, by the government. Because nothing is happening, nothing has come from the president, nothing has been said even by the United Nations since the announcement. Aid workers cannot really get to a lot of these people, so we're genuinely concerned.
Joining us on the line also is Patrick Ayuk from the Soya Institute of Democracy. Patrick, good morning once again.
Good morning, and good morning to listeners of Power FM.
Thank you very much for always making time to speak to us. I'm picking up from my conversation with Isong in this regard. The UN, again, calling for a ceasefire or a truce, but the fact that it's not being observed, how hard is it making things, particularly for human rights activists to go out there and try and help out, as we know that Cameroon is facing not only the coronavirus but also human rights violations and war? Patrick?
Thank you. I think it has been very difficult. Cameroon is facing two epidemics. The war in southern Cameroon or the Anglophone territories, and, of course, the COVID-19 epidemic. So it is very difficult. The ceasefire was declared by one of the self-defense groups fighting in Southern Cameroons or in the English territory, that is Soya. So we thought, as human rights organization, this was a period. This corridor has created human rights institutions to go on the ground and give people much needed supplies, especially when it comes to protection in relation to COVID-19. For people that are hiding in bushes, to get out of the bushes and maybe have some accommodation. For those that have been displaced, to have some protection. But when this ceasefire was announced, the government took advantage that there is a gap. And of course, as Isong has said, they attacked Bafut. Bafut was under onslaught. And this indeed scared some people. Some people had to be running about. And many humanitarian workers or staff of humanitarian agencies have been affected seriously. They cannot work. If you go to the prisons in Yaoundé, because of COVID-19, we've not been able to have contact meetings. But we have been having meetings with international human rights organizations on Zooms and other media platforms to talk about the impact of COVID-19, especially in war zones, like the war that is going on in Southern Cameroons or in the Cameroons. So that impact, if you go to prisons, we talk to a few prisoners. And if you have one of the detainees, Takang Fritz, is seriously sick, affected by COVID-19. People are dying. One of the prisoners said about 30% of inmates have been affected by COVID-19. So there is this serious care in the prison. And aid cannot come in from human rights institutions because the war is still going on. Antonio Guterres made a rallying call for war belligerents to stop fighting, but he didn't bring in any way of helping them to stop it. If you make a call for a ceasefire, then there should be a mechanism or a certain way that you can actually implement or enforce this ceasefire if countries do not respect. So just talking is another kind of talk shop with little or no actions.
You know, Isong, bring you in here and touching on the point that Patrick is making of just talking and action. We know that the President Paul Biya in recent times, and he has failed to act on a number of issues. But where do you think the assistance should come from? Because even the UN seems to be failing in making a breakthrough in this regard. Isong?
We believe that the assistance should come from the government first, but since the government is not going to act, this is the opportunity for France to come in, because the President Paul Biya's government is being sponsored by France, and everyone knows that. And France holds so much leverage over him, and being having a seat at the Security Council, France should really consider its position in the world. And we are in a situation where no one knows where Mr. Biya is. No one knows what's happening in the country. There are no flights in and out. 8 flights have been stopped. The idea that there are only 2,579 cases of coronavirus, which we checked this morning according to Johns Hopkins University, and 114 dead, it's inaccurate. So those numbers are not right. Those numbers are not correct. We believe they're far higher than that. France should understand that lockdown or the good health facilities are not only good for the French, they're also good for Cameroonians, and start to really act now, because we know that over the next few weeks there'll be a peak in Cameroon, and when that happens, especially for people in the villages or the towns where there are no medical facilities, it will be devastating. So it's time for France, the United Nations, or the countries that are actually supporting and propping up Mr. Biya's government to act, and really act now.
Patrick, in terms of just managing COVID-19, then the measures that have been put in place by the government of Cameroon, do they look like they are working? If not, what should the next step be? Because understandably now more than 2,200 cases and just over 100 coronavirus-related deaths since March. And again, with the issues of war and other things happening around there, it's almost impossible for the health system to work properly. We know that the UNICEF was talking about how some of the facilities have just been attacked and burnt down and destroyed. So the medics are fleeing and so on. So the issue of health becomes a big problem. Patrick?
Thank you. The measures have been inconsistent and ineffective. Inconsistent in the sense that there is lack of leadership. The president, there are rumors that the president has passed on, the president is no longer living. When you see what is happening in other countries, presidents are coming out in motivating their people, telling them on what to do and what not to do. Human rights organizations are launching fundraising emergencies to help the government in order to push forward this the campaign to eradicate COVID-19 in communities. That is not happening in Cameroon. In Cameroon, there is a situation where the Minister of Territorial Administration, Tanganji, is actually banning human rights organizations from raising money in relation to COVID-19. There is an organization known as Ayuk Foundation that is under constant attack by the government for launching fundraising. Government is claiming that these human rights organizations are raising money to support terrorists or restoration forces or self-defense groups that are fighting in Southern Cameroons. So it deters, it affects fundraising initiative. Even political parties that have decided to support the government in COVID-19 initiative, you know of Maurice Kamto, who is the main opposition leader who happened to win the election in 2019, but he claimed the election he was duped. He launched a campaign for fundraising, but the government banned the fundraising initiative. The government has gone as far as forcing people to close their bank accounts, or especially the accounts of one of the founder of Ayuk Foundation, former Justice Ayuk Paul Abini. So it is actually inconsistent, and the government made a partial lockdown for 2 weeks. But being a country that is deteriorating economically, and now Cameroon falls within the highly indebted poor countries, it couldn't cope for just 2 weeks, a partial lockdown, not the kind of lockdown that we have been observing in South Africa. I mean, a partial lockdown, they couldn't cope, they opened it, and people were celebrating in nightclubs, restaurants, so on and so forth. So what is the problem here? Even to provide protective gears to even people in the hospital is difficult. You have to buy your own protective gears. The military, the security officials are taking advantage of poor people. They see you in the street moving without a mask. They arrest you. You pay a hasty amount of money. They do not give masks to people, but they are robbing people, taking money. So that is the problem. There is lack of leadership. There is lack of the will for the government to allow organizations that are ready to help, based on the fact that they are trying to defend or protect a specific hegemony that is existing in Cameroon, the Paul Biya hegemony. So that is a serious problem that we are facing as humanitarian organizations. So it affects all parts of the country. Then the situation becomes worse in Southern Cameroon. I've had friends that have died. 2 days ago, a former principal died of COVID-19. A friend that has been in the U.S., the cousins, the uncle died. There were so many people dying. And this negligence also came, when COVID-19 started, the Speaker of the National Assembly, Kaba Yegejibre, was in France receiving treatment. And when he heard of that there is a parliamentary sitting for the first time and they need to look for a new speaker, he moved from France during the period of lockdown to Cameroon, and he was welcome in the parliament. And we heard most of the parliamentarians have been contaminated by this. Yeah. So there is a rampant spread because of lack of leadership, lack of discipline, and being a regime that is dictatorial, things will be worse, as Isong said.
And just a final point to look at, Isong. Now, when you look at the issue now of just the war that we experiencing there in Cameroon, are we seeing politics being given more prominence in terms of dealing with health issues? Is that where the big problem is, where the powers that be are more concerned about holding on to power than just the lives of the people of Cameroon?
Of course, Gwyneth, that's exactly what's happening. When just before the lockdown, there was a consignment of medical equipment that arrived. They all straight away went to Yaoundé, and when these medical equipments arrive, or any aid that arrives, the president's name or the president's wife's name is there. So the preference is for the French Cameroonians. Nothing is happening in the Southern Cameroons. They've politicized the medical equipment. They politicized everything. The lockdown lasted for about 3 weeks because the brewery in the country is owned by the French. So they could not stand the economic consequences of having a lockdown for a few weeks. So, and the people of, say, Southern Cameroons or the rural areas, the people don't really have any chance at all. So the everything that the government owns or the government can lay hands on now is concentrated around Yaoundé, and that will be for the ministers or the directors or the people that can afford it. Because there's no reason why flights cannot fly, obviously, in and out of the country, which makes sense. That packages cannot, or medical packages cannot fly in without permission from the government. There's no, and at the same time, people are allowed to sit in bars and restaurants and eat and drink and socialize. So it comes down to the point that the powers that be in the country are controlling everything, and they're seeing this as a very good opportunity for them to, some of them to even make money for themselves, and the people that are opposing them, the Southern Cameroons, the people going in for independence and fighting for this. This is an opportunity for the government to actually push them back and take back territory.
From your side, Patrick, just a final comment in terms of the way forward again, with the President Paul Biya being absent, and we hear stories about his whereabouts, and people still questioning what should the next step be, and who should be coming on board to help out, if anyone.
I think the next step is that the Cameroon government should show leadership. Biya should come out and inspire its people. President Paul Biya should come out and talk to the people and those that are in the regime. But the most important thing is international pressure. International human rights organizations, we've been having meetings and we've been discussing this thing that Cameroon is facing two epidemics, especially in Ambazonia, which is the English-speaking regions that has declared itself independence. So self-declared territory of Ambazonia, they need to put pressure on the government to do a lot of things. Now we have realized that international institutions like International Monetary Fund have donated money to the Cameroon government and other institutions, maybe to fight COVID-19 or deal with other issues. But the painful thing is that the government is channeling these funds to actually intensify, buy more weapons, and kill a lot of people in Southern Cameroons, which is not what was supposed to be done with that money. The Bamenda Airport is situated in Southern Cameroon. This is where Cameroon government has used at its military base. It is actually using aid that is receiving from international organizations to sponsor its wars, to buy more weapons. There was an organization, a Canadian agency, a human rights agency, reported a few days ago on how the government has actually used this period of COVID-19 to beef its defense in Bamenda, which happens to be one of the major cities in the Anglophone territory, to make sure it completes this war. So it is necessary for the African Union, the United Nations, the Security Council to actually intensify its measures in terms of dealing with COVID-19. The World Health Organization has to do a lot to hold the government to responsible to stop the spread of this epidemic. And we have noticed that the only thing that can bring genuine peace and can allow the fight against COVID-19 to be successful, both the war and the fight, is imposing a sunset of a ceasefire. I mean, a meaningful ceasefire that can tell the government to withdraw its troops or the government to stop fighting against these self-defense groups in Cameroon, and for the self-defense groups to stop. So we need an immediate ceasefire. We need a mechanism in place both locally and internationally to make sure that the spread of COVID-19 is being contained. Otherwise, it will be worse in Cameroon, especially because of the poor facilities that are there, and these poor facilities have been exacerbated by the war going on in the Anglophone territories.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Patrick Ayuk and Isong Asu, thank you very much for taking time to speak to us. I appreciate your time and your insights.
You've been listening to a Power 98.7 podcast. For more podcasts, visit power987.co.za or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.